Welcome to Meanwhile at the Museum, the podcast that takes you behind the scenes with the people, stories, and shenanigans that make Cincinnati Museum Center what it is. I'm Cody Effner, and I'm joined today, first, as always, by Mitch Seifert, who is our, editor, producer,
editor,
sound engineer?
All of the above.
What sounds cool?
All of the above.
All right. Magic Mitch, now behind the mic. And Katie Hunt, who is our paleontology lab manager through Elevation Science Institute, which is a partnership that we have here at Cincinnati Museum Center with Elevation Science, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I got to come here last October in this new partnership to prepare fossils in the Paleo Lab here, which is really exciting.
If you've not visited the museum, or you've not been in a while, or you just don't pay attention, and I get it, paying attention's a real hard thing. The Paleo Lab, as we call it for shorthand, it's visible right from the gallery. So when you're walking through the Ancient Worlds Hiding in Plain Sight gallery, you can look in and see you, Katie, working on fossils.
It's fantastic. I've gotten the chance to work in a couple of these labs before. We call them fishbowl labs. So people can look in through the glass and see us in action. So it's usually me and some volunteers in there.
Like, you're doing the work. You're doing real life paleontology in front of people.
We really are, and I think some people think we aren't, or that we're somehow quote unquote faking it. But we're really doing the real thing. I think it'd be more expensive to be faking it in there versus actually working on real fossils.
We just have a cabinet full of those. What are they, like the National Geographic sets where you can get them and you can dig for
exactly
fake fossils?
You get your little popsicle stick and you get scrape through there. That's definitely what we're doing in there.
All right, well, let's just jump right into it. Do you use popsicle sticks? What kind of tools and equipment? Do you really?
Yeah, sometimes we do. Honestly, though, I'm using popsicle sticks more for like applying glue.
Okay.
We keep our glue in little jars, and it's almost like spreading, I don't know, like honey is kind of the consistency of it. So yes, we do use popsicle sticks, but we're not using them to like dig through hardened cornstarch for chicken bones or anything like that.
Do you have to eat the popsicles?
No, we
before
don't.
you use the sticks?
That would be fantastic. And you know what? We're applying glue anyway. They're going to get sticky no matter what. But
so it's not Elmer's glue. Is it like super glue, or what kind of glue is it?
Yeah, so the glue that we use, it's basically these little, it's like almost like a little bit of plastic that is dissolved in acetone. And so it helps to hold the fossil together. But what's really cool about it is it's completely reversible. So let's say I am putting a fossil back together again, and I get a piece that I think goes in the right spot, and then I look at it, and I'm like, oh, it doesn't go there. I can always add a little bit more acetone and kind of dissolve it, and so it's kind of nice for collections work.
Fossils they're fossilized bone, they're hardened bone.
Yeah.
Tissue also sometimes?
Sometimes, yeah. We do find things like skin impressions, and some crews find things like mummified dinosaurs. So it turned into a mummy on its own, naturally. So don't think about, being wrapped up or anything like that, like a mummy.
A T-Rex couldn't possibly. Its arms aren't long enough.
Right. Too short. And then it managed to fossilize. So sometimes we find stuff like that tissue or tendons we'll see in there sometimes. That's pretty cool.
Oh, that is cool.
Yeah.
But since they're kind of within rock and so treated almost like rock, so they break apart and they crumble just like other rocks, so you're gluing it back together.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's a giant puzzle piece.
Without a
really
picture.
Is. Yes, exactly. No pictures, no box to go by.
Mitch, I should let you do this interview. You love dinosaurs. Like
I do, yeah.
Childhood Mitch was destined to be a paleontologist.
Yeah, that was my dream as a kid. Now I'm doing this instead, but to be in the proximity
yeah,
with the dinosaurs.
You're right upstairs,
I'm close.
though.
I'm close. Yeah, so when you're putting these together, like, you don't have any picture. You don't have, like, how do you figure out what goes where?
A lot of trial and error. Especially so if you're walking past the lab window, you'll probably see me sometimes in there just like picking up a piece and like spinning it around at different angles and like, does it match here? No. Does it match here? No. Does it match here? And I sometimes have to prevent myself from just hurling it at the floor and getting frustrated with it. You have to have a lot of patience to do this.
So how do you know that what you have is a piece of the puzzle and not just rock?
Now, there is a little bit of a difference between a fossil and the rock around it. Mm-hmm. At least at our dig sites, there's a little bit of a color difference. Usually our fossil is a little bit darker than the rock around it. There's a texture difference. It kind of looks spongy inside. And even with that sponginess, too, one of the best ways to test is sticking it to your tongue.
Is that true?
It is true.
Why?
I usually don't do it if there's already glue on it, but yeah, it'll stick. It's the little holes in the sponge, or that spongy look. It'll stick right to your tongue and kind of suction on a little bit.
That is crazy.
It is crazy.
I've heard that before. I was about to ask.
Yes,
I was going to ask
yeah.
if that was legit. And
It is legit. It is legit. I don't do it all the time, but it is kind of a fun thing to do. Especially on our first day out in the field with like a whole new batch of people. It's kind of fun to just like stand there and just stick it to your tongue.
So when you're out in the field and it's hot and it's dusty and it's dirty, it's long days, do you ever get really frustrated and just start like getting into arguments, being like, "You're such a fossil licker"?
That would be awesome. I'm going to have to add that to my repertoire. That's a great insult, you know?
So the staff have shirts, and on the back they say history detective or ask me for a fun fact, dinosaur wrangler. Should we put fossil liquor on the back?
I think so. As long as people don't get offended by it, I think it would be fantastic. I think that would be a lot of fun.
It's
You just need to add some context.
it's provocative. It's got to be a shirt that has tails, like a tuxedo, so you can put all this is why fossil licking's okay, and it's not a
it's just
derogatory
increasingly
term.
smaller font going all the way down. It explains all of it.
I don't know. I just like being provocative and let's just see what happens.
People ask questions, so.
So, all right, I have like a million questions about the process, but let's back up. Can you explain the partnership between Cincinnati Museum Center and Elevation Science Institute?
Yeah, so we've been partners in other ways for the last couple of years. Elevation Science became Elevation Science in 2017. And basically, we're a nonprofit organization, and one of the biggest things that we do throughout the year is we offer a field season. We offer 7 weeks of digging in southern Montana, where anybody can sign up. Any background. We do have a little bit of an age limit. We don't have little kids out on site. But we see folks from parent-child duos of kids that might be really into this, and the parent ends up being even more into it than the kids. We see college students, and then we see all the way up to recent retirees coming out, bucket list kind of stuff. But in all of this, we are digging on public lands run by the Bureau of Land Management. And so part of that is we need to be able to store our fossils in a federal repository that is kind of certified by the Bureau of Land Management as a place that will be able to keep them safe and keep them accessible to anybody who wants to do research on them or, kind of observe them. And Cincinnati Museum Center was our federal repository and continues to be all the way back to 2017 to now. And so we were preparing the fossils elsewhere, up in Philadelphia, up until this past year. And we were able to form this partnership with Cincinnati Museum Center to be able to use the Paleo Lab here and to enlist the help of the volunteers that are here in this beautiful lab space it's huge. We are so much more productive here already, and the fossils don't have to make a huge journey to where they're finally stored. They're only going about 5 minutes down the road instead of 8.5 hours down the road.
Because Cincinnati Museum Center has done digs out west in the past, and it's a major undertaking. I mean, there's a lot of infrastructure involved. It's a lot of people involved in kind of human horsepower to do this work, right? And this is something that Elevation Science is already, I mean, you have this whole system designed and developed for it. And in 2018 here at Cincinnati Museum Center, we opened the Paleo Lab. In the Museum of Natural History and Science. We had a Paleo Lab space at our collections facility. This one in the building now is updated, it's upgraded. You can view it from the museum floor. But as you mentioned, primarily it was volunteer run, which is wonderful. We have really fantastic volunteers that you continue to work with.
Yes.
But what's fantastic now is you are here 5 days a week. When the museum is open. So it's not Monday through Friday, it's Thursday through Monday. So when the museum's open, you can see Katie working.
Yes. Yeah. It's amazing. It's great.
So the partnership is kind of, listen, you're already doing the digs. You're already out there. You're already collecting the materials. We're already a repository for them.
Right.
We've been doing this together, and it just kind of formalized and came together.
It really did. It's such a fantastic thing. Plus, I'm a little biased too. I grew up here in Cincinnati, so this was an opportunity for me to move back home too, which is kind of nice.
So you're a Cincinnati kid. What's your background? How'd you end up here?
It's kind of, I kind of stumbled into it backwards almost. So growing up here, fossils in my backyard, right? All over the place. But I was an archaeology kid. I was
Okay.
really into kind of the first people in North America. And that's actually what I went to school for. So I started out at University of Cincinnati, and I did my field school at Big Bone Lick State Park right across the river.
Awesome.
But it was all archaeology, and we just happened to stumble upon Ice Age megafauna, mammoth, mastodon, that kind of stuff. And that got me really interested in looking at something called zooarchaeology. So I studied basically the animal bones that are found in archaeological sites, thinking about things like what were people eating? What was coexisting with people at these times?
So it's thousands of years ago. We're still talking prehistoric.
Yes, prehistoric times, but not nearly as old as the dinosaurs. That's kind of what I studied, but I started working at some museums in Indianapolis during my grad school times and slowly started shifting towards paleontology. And I got really lucky to go out on my first dig in the summer of 2020. Digging dinosaurs. So I'd been on digs before, done some archaeology work, but this was my first paleontology dig. And since then, I just got back from my 5th field season, digging in basically the same area, very close together to the elevation science sites, and it's been awesome. It's been really cool.
So what's the coolest thing that you found on your digs?
The coolest thing that I have found, I don't know. I'm really into, I get really excited about really big limb bones. So like finding a femur, an upper leg bone from a sauropod dinosaur, so a long neck dinosaur is, I don't know, it's really thrilling for me. It's really cool to see such a huge fossil in the ground. But it's all really exciting just because, when you flip up a piece of rock and there's a fossil underneath it, you're the first human to ever see that. And there's something really special about that.
That's cool.
But that doesn't just happen in the field. It happens in the lab too.
So a femur, in human terms, it's a thigh bone. Would that be the biggest kind of intact bone you could find, right?
Yeah. From these individuals, yeah.
Because you think of, sauropod's neck is very long, or tail is very long, but
Right.
those are dozens, hundreds?
Dozens, yeah.
Dozens of bones kind of stacked against each other. So finding
Exactly.
a full tail is pretty rare.
It is pretty rare. It has happened on our dig sites. We've also found articulated neck bones. So those are called cervical vertebrae. And this summer we found some kind of underneath a big femur. There were just a whole bunch of neck bones all still together as if it was when it was alive, which is really cool.
Do we know what species of dinosaurs this is?
Don't know. It's definitely a sauropod, so a long neck dinosaur. Don't know which kind yet. A lot of those fossils are still in the ground. Some of them will be coming back here this fall, but the rest of them will be some projects for future years.
How do you find out what kind of dinosaur they are?
Yeah, so sometimes we can tell right away in the field, but most of the time, all the fossils have to get prepped first. They have to get, cleaned off, put back together again in the lab, and then a researcher can come in and compare and contrast to other known dinosaurs and see if they have any of the same characteristics as stuff that's already known. And kind of go from there.
That's so wild that these are all gone. They're all extinct, so you don't really have anything to compare it to except other versions of it, other bones of it.
Mm-hmm.
So you said you found a neck, cervical bones, underneath a femur.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of like the position a dinosaur would have to be in to be. So a couple questions. How is that possible?
Yeah.
And why are these things not just found together? Like, why is the tail not just found all stacked up?
Yeah, so we have to think about the environment in which they were kind of deposited where they are now. You have to think about things like, we know that one of the dig sites that we dig at, that Cincinnati Museum Center also used to dig at, the Mother's Day site, we know that they were all juvenile Diplodocus. And we are fairly confident that something had happened where they had all died upstream and they had desiccated a little bit. So they dried out, kind of maybe started to kind of rot and fall apart. And then it seemed like some kind of big event happened, like a debris flow. So think of like a slurry of mud and some kind of flash flooding situation pushed everything down kind of to where we find them now. So that jumbles it all up, especially since they'd already dried out. They'd already kind of rotted a little bit. So we find, the bones of really little ones next to some that are medium-sized and all different ways. And for the individual I was talking about before, with the neck bones and the femur and everything like that, they're still pretty associated. They're still kind of in the same general vicinity of each other, but it still was tumbled around a little bit.
And Diplodocus, we have one of these, we believe, on display.
Yes, yeah.
In our dinosaur hall.
Correct.
So right when you enter the dinosaur hall, the Gallimiopus head kind of greets you.
Yeah.
But on that same platform beside it is a juvenile Diplodocus, or that's, and we say we think
Exactly.
because sometimes you think you find a different species, and in reality, it's just a younger version of a bigger one. You're like, oh, we
Yes.
found this new species that's a little smaller than this other one that seems very similar. And
Right.
then years go by, our research goes on, you say, oh, turns out that that's a juvenile.
Right. Yeah. And actually, so we dig at both the dig sites that those sauropods are from. So the Gallimiopus, we have to walk right past that to get to these other sites, including the one with the femur and the neck bones and everything like that, which is really cool. It's like kind of interesting that we're all digging in the same spot.
I just imagine a Wile E. Coyote cutout. You know, like when he falls off the cliff and you see the little cutout of him in the ground. I just imagine a Gallimiopus cutout, and you just walk by that every time.
Yep. Yeah.
Not
basically.
quite, but
Yeah. I mean, the bones are here now, but you
Right.
know, yeah. So not only do I get to walk past it every day coming into the museum, I also get to walk past the dig site when I am out in Montana.
Do you have a favorite dinosaur?
I go back and forth.
Okay.
My favorites tend to be kind of what I'm working on in that moment. So right now, I'm still really excited to buy these sauropods. So Diplodocus, Barosaurus, Gallimiopus. Those kinds of dinosaurs get me really excited. I really like those.
Mitch, favorite dinosaur?
When I was a kid, I could like name all of them. Well, it seemed like all of them at the time. But there's so many different dinosaur species that, like, as a kid, I'd never heard of Gallimiopus,
No.
but now it's a favorite. I mean, I like a lot of the ones in our dinosaur hall. The Torvosaurus is pretty cool. It's also a very rare specimen. So
Mitch has given a very team first answer, a
Yeah.
very museum first answer.
I don't want to just be like, oh yeah, it's the T-Rex.
T-Rex are cool. They're still cool. But my nieces were here on a field trip, and so I caught up with them, and it's not the nicest my niece has ever been, but it's like the time my niece was like, Uncle Cody's cool. Every other time she was like, oh, hi adults. Adults are boring. And so I was walking around with them a little bit, and there was a kid in her group, and he goes, do you guys have a T-Rex? I said, we have a T-Rex skull. And he goes, but not its body, that's all you have? I said, yeah, but then, we have this. And he's like, oh. He like walked away. I was like, chill out, kid. Like,
yeah.
man,
Yeah.
like I didn't know.
T-Rex or nothing.
Yeah.
like, young
for a lot
Nicolas
of kids
Cage was
and
visiting.
adults.
So, yes, we have T-Rex skull. We don't have a full T-Rex. We don't have, a Triceratops on display in the gallery.
No.
We do have a Triceratops skull in the lab.
Correct. Yes.
We don't have, for the most part, those dinosaurs that you see when you get the little plastic
Sure.
packs at the store. Our dinosaurs are on display particularly because of their importance to science, or that they are unique, and we want to showcase that, and we want to kind of be on that edge of dinosaur research. So Mitch, in talking about the Torvosaur, I never even heard of it. I'd never seen one. I had no. If you told me to draw one, number one, I wouldn't be able to anyway, even if I knew what it looked like. Number two, I wouldn't even know where to start. So there are a lot of dinosaurs that people are going to come in here and they're going to learn about or see for the first time, and hopefully be like, dang, that's my new favorite dinosaur.
Right. Which is really cool. It's really exciting.
And so you kind of rediscover your favorite dinosaur every time you're working.
I do. I really do. Because I spend so much time with it. It can take hours and days and months to get even one fossil done. Not to mention, a lot of fossils from the same individual or the same dig site. So you kind of fall in love with it. You're spending a lot of time looking up pictures of it online. Like you're really excited about it. You're telling everybody about it. Or if I step outside the lab to facilitate at the lab window, or talk to our educators about what's going on inside the lab, you kind of fall in love with it, which is kind of cool.
I'm going to get a little controversial here.
Uh-oh.
You talked about sometimes you'll see skin impressions and things like that. Did all dinosaurs have feathers? Did some? Like, what? Do you see feather impressions?
No. I think it's some of them. I definitely want to lean towards some of the theropods having some of them. So, like, think about Allosaurus. But, yeah, I don't really know. This is so far outside of my realm that I'm kind of worried about saying anything about it because I might be wrong.
I don't think people have a true context of how old dinosaurs are. Like,
No.
when you're dealing with that large of a span of time, it's almost unfathomable. And movies like Jurassic Park and things like that make it feel like they're very present. And
Right.
going to museums and seeing the fossils make them feel like they're very present, but they're super, super old, which seems like the most unintelligent thing I could say. So the thought that feathers or really in
Right.
detail skin impressions are going to persevere that long
Yeah.
is really difficult. So sometimes, I mean, science is all about grasping at straws and just
A
seeing
little
what
bit.
sticks, right?
Sure.
It's
Yeah.
I have an idea, let's test it, and it works or it doesn't. And then
Yeah.
once it works, someone else will say, but what if you tried that same thing this way? And you like science is about poking holes to make sure that we have the most complete picture that we can, right?
Right.
And with dinosaurs, it's crazy to me to think like you're not just putting them together and saying like, here's what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
You can look at it and think, how did it move?
Right.
Not only what did it eat, was it a plant eater, was it a meat eater, but like what did it eat? And how do we find that stuff out? And that there's
Right.
so much more than just piecing them together.
Yes, yeah. We're looking at the whole environment for these critters. And our idea about dinosaurs, it's constantly, science is always changing, but paleontology is always changing. The technology continues to get better, and we're able to see more stuff around the fossils. Let's say we have a slab of fossils, we might be able to do some kind of scanning on it and see stuff that we're not visibly seeing with our eyes. And stuff like that. But being able to like build those environments out of the fossils we're finding and looking at the plant fossils, those count. Those are still fossils. Looking at trace fossils like footprints, that can help us figure out things like their gait and how much they, how big their steps were and how fast they were moving. These are all things in paleontology that people are doing. So they're not just looking at the bones. There's so much more to be seen.
It's really incredible. And they're looking at poop too.
Oh yeah. Yep. When we find it.
Mitch knows. I love talking about
It's
our dino poop.
favorite topic for Cody.
Coprolites, yeah.
Fantastic.
Which is when I started in the marketing role here at the Museum Center, one of the first interviews I had to do, we had owl pellets.
Oh.
That
I love
like
owl
they
pellets.
regurgitate
Yeah.
these like owl hairballs essentially. And I had someone in our science museum lined up to do the interview. And the morning of, they said, I'm not going to be able to do it for whatever reason. I don't know if they got stage fright or what. And I said, well, where is it? And they go, well, it's in the lab. You can grab it. But what are you going to do? And I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to go figure it out. So I'm like looking up. I'm like, just give me all the instructions. What do you do with this? What are you looking for? And you're basically, and kids, a lot of people probably did this in school growing up. Did either both of
Oh
you?
yeah.
I don't think that
It was
I
a
did.
big deal. I loved it. It was so much fun.
I didn't either, but I am also learning as I talk to more people. I may not have gone to a great school.
Oh, well,
My wife will tell you that based on my reading list growing up. But so this was a first for me, but it was very cool because you're looking and you can pick out like, oh, that's a jawbone of a field mouse and stuff like that. Same thing with dinosaur poop is you can look inside and you can kind of like, are you finding like traces of other bones in dinosaur poop?
That's something that I've never looked at. And that's something that as far as I know, we have not found on our dig sites.
Like poop itself?
yeah.
Okay. Dinosaur poop though,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, right.
There are like
There
wild
are other
critters out
things.
there.
Yes, yeah. Lots of big cats out there we've noticed this year.
Are there really?
Yeah.
Like what kind of big cat? Like,
Oh, like
not just like
mountain lions and
Awesome.
bobcats. Yeah. Actually, last week we were out on site and we walked up to site. It had rained the night before, and we just a little bit, but enough to kind of smooth out the ground. And there were a couple of really big cat prints walking right into this dig site.
So paint the picture. What do these dig sites look like? And I know we want to be a little cagey about exactly where some of them are, but what part of the country are you in?
Yeah.
Let's close our eyes and let's visualize it. If anyone has trouble sleeping or anything like that, you can listen to Katie. It kind of put you in this scenic place, and maybe and hopefully you're not driving.
Yeah. Okay, so we are in Montana, and the environment is very desert-like. Prickly pear cactus, lots of sagebrushes, not very many trees at all at least at one of our sites. The other site has some pine trees. But, so everything's pretty low to the ground. Everything wants to poke or sting you. So imagine, we've got scorpions on site. We run into a lot of different bees and wasps because they're really interested in the water that we have with us. We've got, these big critters out there that are mostly out there at night. We're not seeing them during the day. So you've got your mountain lions, your bobcats. We have pronghorn, which is kind of like an antelope. We definitely have white-tailed deer out there and mule deer.
Do you see, are there coyotes? Are you
There's evidence of
seeing
coyotes,
those?
and we've
Yeah.
heard them before in the distance, which I think is always really eerie. And we've got all kinds of lizards and things like that, too.
What about snakes?
Yes, we have rattlesnakes out there, and we saw actually quite a few rattlesnakes this summer.
Awesome. I am never going.
Yeah, nope, that's okay. We have some people on our team who are also very, very afraid of snakes, so we definitely steer clear of them. But yeah, actually this summer too, we had gotten a really big rainstorm, and at the end of the day, we cover up our dig sites with big tarps. And so there was quite a bit of water, a couple inches of water in a divot in the tarp, and there was one of the biggest salamanders I have ever seen. But you think it's a desert environment, so where is the salamander coming from? Where is
Right.
it spending its time till it rains? It's really fascinating. It's really cool. Lots of little toads and stuff like that too after a rain.
You've mentioned water a couple times. Where are you all getting your water? Because how many people are at the site at one time?
Yeah, so we have about 30 people on site at any given time. This summer we had 2 weeks where we were pushing about 40 people on site at a given time, which is a lot of people. But we can spread out to a couple different sites in the area. So there's plenty of elbow room. But we are bringing all of our water with us. So not only are we bringing our drinking water with us and a couple of refill jugs for people to refill their water bottles, we also have to bring in lots of big containers of water because we use it to make our field jackets, to wrap up our fossils, and that basically they're custom carrying cases that they then are kind of brought here to the museum in.
So you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
No trees, no,
Mhm.
not a lot of vegetation, just mean looking stuff.
Yeah.
How close are you sleeping and staying to? Are you camping out? Are you staying in cabins?
Yeah, so we stay in cabins at something called the YBRA, which is the Yellowstone Bighorn Research Association, and they're outside of Red Lodge, Montana. And so we are about an hour to an hour and a half away from camp. So we drive to site from camp every day and bring everybody and all of our water and all of our equipment with us.
So the equipment goes to and from.
Some of it does.
A lot.
We park some of it out there. Some of it stays out there all summer. But there's some stuff like we sometimes we need to bring a generator with us or things like that will travel with us.
These are rocks. So how are you accessing them? Are you using jackhammers? Are you using heavy equipment, or is this all by hand?
So in some places we are. The site that I quarry manage, we've had to use a jackhammer at before. That's run off of our little tiny generator. We have used a bobcat before, but mostly just to lift fossils out at the end of the season. The gentleman who brings it out has a really cool boom arm that he can kind of stick out over the dig site, and then we can kind of rig everything up to it and lift out these really heavy field jackets full of fossils and rock.
Walk us through kind of what a typical day looks
Yeah.
like as you're arriving at
Okay.
on site.
I'll walk you. Today is Wednesday, so I'm going to
Okay.
walk you through what a Wednesday looks like because it's actually kind of special for us. So first off, we start out in camp. We have breakfast at 7 a.m. sharp in the lodge.
What's for breakfast?
So it's typically a really nice spread of, some scrambled eggs and some hash browns and maybe a meat or something like that. We pack our sandwiches there for lunch.
What kind of sandwich you packing? I want to get real in depth on it.
Yeah. So I'm packing a peanut butter and jelly. Because
Okay.
when it's so hot outside,
Classic.
I don't want anything else.
Yeah.
So it's a go-to for me.
You don't want to load up on mayonnaise when it's that hot.
No, some people do, and I'm very proud of them, but I cannot play that game.
Speaking of which, what's the bathroom situation like at the site?
Yeah, so we're pretty fancy. We have one porta potty at each of our sites.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's there, but there's also some nice, ravines and hills and things like that too. If you don't want to walk that far all the way back.
And
Yeah.
someday that poop may fossilize. That's
Exactly. Yeah.
amazing.
The porta potty has flipped over a couple times, so they have had to tie it down now. After this was a couple of years ago, that we would rock up to site first thing in the morning, and it's door down on the ground, no one inside, but kind of a bummer for a couple days until they can get out and
Yeah.
fix that. So we're packing our lunch. And we get in the vans and we drive our hour to an hour and a half, depending on which site we're going to. So on Wednesdays, we go to what we call the Anderson area, where the gallium opus was found. And so we get there and we kind of distribute out to our sites. We have 4 different little areas that we dig at. So everybody grabs out of the big bins. We usually ask people to grab a pokey tool. So that's anything from an ice pick or an awl to a screwdriver works great. We ask them to grab some brushes and usually some kind of rock hammer. And then everybody goes out to their little sites and we stay there until about, 2:30 or so, until it gets really, really hot. And since it's Wednesday, we'll pack up a little bit early. We'll drive about an hour back to town because it's Milkshake Wednesday. That is a tradition for elevation science. There's a little boxcar restaurant, and we stop and we all get a milkshake. And then what's even better is we'll go back to camp, we'll get everybody showered, and then Wednesday evenings, we always drive our participants over Beartooth Pass. So that gets up to about 11,000 feet in elevation up in the mountains, and you can't take a bad picture up there. And we do it right at golden hour. We go right at 7 p.m. And we stay up there through sunset. We stop at a couple different spots, and people get to do a little bit of sightseeing. It's a stark difference from being out in the desert digging. It's really cool. Wednesdays are really special.
That's awesome.
So that's kind of our average day.
Are you on site? Are you digging 7 days a week when you're out there?
So our crew is digging 5 days a week,
Okay.
Monday through Friday, with our participants for the week. So typically they arrive on Sundays, and then they leave the following Saturday, and we do all the transportation to and from Billings. That's our main airport in Montana. And yeah.
What are the accommodations like at the lodge? Like, do you have TVs? Do you like?
There's
all
no
that stuff?
TVs.
No TVs.
There's no air conditioning, but you don't really need it. You're up on the side of the mountain. It's about 7,000 feet in elevation, so it gets pretty cool at night, which is nice. Typically, participants are staying in shared dorms. There's some cabins of different sizes throughout camp. So there's some that are individual sized, all the way up to could sleep 10 or 12 people. So it just depends week by week what we have. There's other groups that are in camp too. Typically schools doing their field schools. So yeah, we share the space.
What kind of stuff do you do for fun? Like,
Ooh.
what are you doing at night to unwind? What do you do on the weekends?
So during the week, we offer different classes every evening, or our Beartooth Pass drive and things like that, for people to be able to go and get a little bit more in depth with what they're doing out there. We'll talk about geology. We'll typically try to have our interns do a talk at least once throughout the week about what their research is, which is fun. But a lot of times we just spend time, especially as staff, sitting on the porch, just watching the sunset. It's really nice.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been to Montana once, and it is beautiful. It is this like very rugged, almost like a lonely beauty, because it's kind of sparse, but it's just wide open.
Yeah.
It is wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. And we're really lucky to be staying in camp so close to the town of Red Lodge. It's super cute. There's all the little touristy shops and really nice outdoor outfitters and stuff like that. There's a beautiful creek that runs through town. You know, it's very picturesque.
That's where the salamander came from.
Yes,
It
yeah.
hitched a ride.
It hitched a ride with
the
us.
hour.
Yeah. Somebody put it there.
So you're out in Montana.
Mm-hmm.
How do all the first you mentioned the field jacket. So
Yeah.
what happens when you find a fossil?
Yeah. So when we find a fossil, our goal isn't to uncover it all immediately. What we'll do is we'll kind of try to find the edges of our fossil. Where's it going? Is it going into the wall? Which direction is it heading? So once we've found kind of where the fossil stops, the next thing that we have to do is we dig a big trench around it, like a little moat all the way around it, so we can kind of isolate the fossil, get it on its own. And that's when we get to the point of putting on these field jackets. So we typically put down a layer of tin foil and usually a little bit of duct tape to hold it down onto our fossil and to keep it safe from plaster that we use. So we use 2 different methods for wrapping up our fossils. The main one, and I think the one that a lot of people know about or have seen on TV, is we use strips of burlap fabric dipped in plaster of Paris. And we'll add a couple different layers to our fossils to kind of give them like a safe and hard carrying case. And we can make that however big or as small as we need to. And another technique that we'll use is they sell these rolls of gauze that are like pre-soaked in plaster. And all we have to do is just dip those in water. They are sold for emergency rooms. So a lot of times they're used for casting you if you broke your arm or your leg. And they work the same way. We do a couple layers of that to make the top part of our carrying case. And then after that, our goal is to kind of dig down and kind of undercut our fossil and start to make it almost look like a mushroom. So you've got this kind of bulbous, almost round container on top that has rock and fossil in it. And then you dig underneath it and you chop your pedestal off and you flip the fossil over really quickly. You put your plaster on the underside and then it's ready for transportation.
That's wild.
So then all that extra rock is what you're getting rid of here in our lab.
Yes. Yeah. Lots of buckets of rock go to the dumpster. But that's what makes these things so heavy too. I think 2 or 3 years ago, we got out 6,500 pounds of field jackets.
Wow.
But that doesn't mean that that's all just fossil. There's a lot of stuff that comes with it too.
So why bring all the rock with it? Why not try to just get the fossil out and just bring the fossil back?
The fossil is so fragile that you kind of need the rock around it to keep it stabilized. And that's why we want to leave as much rock around it as we can, maybe like an inch or two around the whole fossil, just to keep it nice and snug. Because otherwise, just driving it across country, it's going to vibrate and bounce and break apart and shatter. And there's only so much of the puzzling that we can do, our big jigsaw puzzle, to fix these fossils when they're broken.
And like a femur,
Mhm.
we're talking 3 feet, 4 feet
Somewhere
long,
in there,
maybe?
yeah.
How long would it take you to like fully extract that in the lab?
Yeah, so for me to go from opening my field jacket in the lab to having a finished fossil ready for collections, for a femur, it actually doesn't take all that long.
Really?
They don't have a lot of pokey outy bits, all the sticky outy stuff like a vertebra does, a neck bone or a tailbone. And so I can get that done. And usually I'm working on a couple different projects at once, but maybe even in maybe 2 weeks or so. Whereas a big vertebra could take weeks to even months with bouncing back and forth to other projects.
So these fossils, they're incredibly old, they're incredibly rare, and they're incredibly fragile. Do you feel a lot of pressure when you're cleaning these?
Yes. Yeah. But you get to a point where you start to grow in confidence with it. And it's the same thing digging too. Because like I said, a lot of our participants, they don't have any experience in this. And usually on their first day, they're so nervous, right? They're so afraid of messing up a fossil. But you learn that sometimes stuff's going to break and it's usually fixable, to just go slow and really take your time and try to use some patience. And it gets a little bit easier. But yeah, there is still some pressure.
So then, does being in the fishbowl setting of our Paleo Lab, does that make the pressure worse? Someone's going to see you make
sometimes,
this mistake?
Yeah, sometimes it is a little nerve-wracking, especially if I'm doing something that is, I don't know. Everybody's the media now. Everybody has a camera in their pocket and they can take a picture of something happening. So there's a little bit of that, but most of the time it is not an issue at all.
And you still don't want to spend 2 weeks out of the 5 that you're in the field digging out one bone, right?
Right.
So it's bringing that back. How do you pick these things up? Like, is that where the bobcat comes in, or is a lot of it also just like human horsepower?
Yeah, human horsepower for the most part. We usually try to get a lot of our field jackets to one single staging area. We'll leave our trailer out there and just start loading it up. I think that's what they're doing right now. Actually, on site today is loading up a lot of the stuff that's finished that they can lift on their own. So we'll use things like EMT backboards to carry things, or there's these little backpacks that we'll use sometimes. But a lot of times it's just lifting it with another person on 3, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you all are going to find your own vertebrae out there.
Yes, yeah.
It hurts my back thinking about.
Yeah, and that kind of stuff happens. We try to be really careful about it. We definitely have all done our first aid, and a lot of it is just for personal use and making sure that we're not hurting ourselves.
When they're back here, what are you doing in the lab here, and what are some of the tools that you're using?
So I actually use a lot of the same tools in the field that I use in the lab, but one of my favorite tools in the lab to use is actually just an X-Acto knife. A lot of people will use dental picks, and I'll use them from time to time, but I feel like I have a little bit more control and using it in the same way to kind of poke and scrape and remove rock away from the fossil. And what's really cool in the lab, too, is I've got a lot of different options. So I can use things like those hand tools, those dental tools, the brushes, everything like that. But if there's some really hard stuck-on rock, we use these really awesome tools. They're pneumatic, so they force air through them, and they're almost like little tiny jackhammers. They're called air scribes. So sometimes you'll see us using those, and that's when we get to use the awesome dust collection system. So
Those-
the blue arms that are coming down from the ceiling, and when I'm using those, I also wear a big respirator on my face and giant glasses and hearing protection and everything. And those tools can really help in expediting the process.
You have no band-aids on your fingers. You're
don't.
that good with the X-Acto knife, or do you wear gloves?
So I'm okay with the X-Acto knife. Sometimes things happen, but I also haven't been back in the lab very long after this field season, so things will change.
We'll keep an eye on your fingers for
Yes,
you.
yeah. So far, I still have all of them right now, so that's good.
You talked about the field jackets, and it sort of sounds like you're same thing. If you break your arm, you're putting a cast around your arm, and you're sort of doing the same thing with the fossils. How do you crack that open? How do you get that off?
I'll use a saw, a little cast saw, and just go around the kind of the circumference of my field jacket. And usually I'll have something that I can use as a pry bar to kind of start prying things open. And sometimes we use things even like just different knives and stuff like that, because the burlap cuts pretty easily once you kind of get started. So you'll see us use different knives or the saws and just kind of working on prying them open. It's a lot harder than it looks, though. It's definitely it's a sweaty process.
Do you ever crack one open and you say, "Oh, I remember you"?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah, oh, yeah. I definitely favor the ones that I saw on the ground, because I kind of feel like I know what to expect, right? Even when it's something that maybe didn't go as cleanly in the field as I wanted, then I feel a responsibility that I need to be the one to take care of it, too.
Another thing that people will see when they walk past the lab is we have this big sand pit. This kind of sandbox with fossils sticking up out of it. What is the purpose of that? Is it is it for display purposes, or is there practical use?
The sandbox is really practical, because sometimes when I'm gluing two pieces of fossil together, my best friend is gravity. I want that fit to be nice and snug between the two pieces of fossil. And so being able to prop it up in there and just kind of set the other piece right on top, it works really great for us to be able to do it. Plus, it's garnet sand in there, which is extra fancy because it is super low dust. So in an environment where we're trying to control the dust that we're breathing and that's around us in the space, the garnet sand is just another thing, because play sand that's in your sandbox at home, it's pretty dusty stuff. So that's better used outside than in the lab.
Now I'm going back to the mountain lions, and I'm thinking about, I'm pairing sand, and I'm like, oh, what's a giant mountain lion litter box look like? That's got to be insane.
We were joking about that being the quarry that day that we saw it in there. We were like, okay, but hasn't been an issue so far.
It sounds like such a tedious, like time-consuming process. Is it frustrating for you? Is it therapeutic, or is it just a day?
It depends on the day.
Okay.
Most of the time it's therapeutic. But there are days where it's a little bit more frustrating. But there are other things I have to do sometimes, like enter data into spreadsheets and things like that. So that might be a good day for that, when I'm getting a little frustrated with my fossil. But that's why I also work on multiple fossils at once. So then that way, if I'm working on something that's just getting a little too difficult or needs a lot of glue that needs to dry, I can just turn and move on to the next thing and kind of rotate back.
Do you like doing puzzles at home?
A little bit, not a lot.
No?
Feels too much like work. So sometimes, but it's definitely not a favorite hobby.
Do you listen to music? How do you?
Yeah.
Or are you just go zen?
My hearing protection is Bluetooth, which is super cool. So I'll listen to different podcasts, I'll listen to music, and then some days it's just nothing. Sometimes it's just, let's just be in silence and let's just do this, which, it's kind of nice too.
You're local. You're here from Cincinnati.
Yeah.
Did you grow up coming to the museum center? Do you have any experiences here?
A little bit, yeah. So I do remember coming here in elementary school, and I remember the water table downstairs specifically. But one of the big things I do remember is the Freedom Center opened when I was in kind of later elementary school years.
Really?
So we came down a lot for that, which was really cool. So I have some vague memories here, but I definitely have more memories of that.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was that like? What was the atmosphere like?
Everybody
around
was
that
really
opening? Was people-
everybody was really excited, and it was really cool to be in a brand new space. Just like how after the renovation here, it's exciting to be in a new space, whether it's a new gallery or a whole new facility. It was really exciting, and it was stuff that we were just covering in school too. So it was really significant being on this side of the river, and everything like that, and being able to be a part of that was really neat.
Speaking of new spaces, the Ancient Worlds Hiding in Plain Sight Gallery is right outside the Paleo Lab. So the Paleo Lab is just past the Dinosaur Hall, but it is firmly within Ancient Worlds Hiding in Plain Sight, which are Ordovician fossils. So 450 million years ago, invertebrates, not dinosaurs,
no,
much, much older, things that you would find in your own backyard, as you mentioned at the top of the episode. Did you get to witness the install process?
A little bit. It was just opening right when we started our contract here. But I did get a chance to visit the lab before anything was there. So it was just white walls out in that hallway and stuff like that. And to come in and have the lighting and the fossils and all the stuff there, it's really cool. And it's really cool to be able to look out the window and watch people enjoying that exhibit too.
Yeah, that was a big missing piece for us for a while. And it was always part of the plan. But yeah, it really connected because you walk through Ancient Worlds Hiding in Plain Sight to get to the cave, or then to get to the Ice Age Gallery to kind of continue on through the Museum of Natural History and Science. So it tied it all together. Backing up to music.
Yeah.
If you had a walk-up song, like baseball players have a walk-up song, what would your walk-up song be?
Oh, I don't know. This is a tough question. But I will say that we did kind of do that to one of our staff members this summer.
Did you?
So one of our staff members, Dr. Rick Schmidt, he's a high school teacher in the Philadelphia area during the school year, and then he comes out with us in the field and he teaches our college course. And he's kind of an intense guy. He's great. We love him to death, but he is a little intense sometimes. And we were in the car, and I was driving our college students to site, some of them. And they were like, can you get a video of Rick walking up to site and set it to the Imperial March? And we did it. And it was one of our most well-received videos on social media. It has just been such a hit. So I would love something kind of intense like that, but I'm not sure what it would be. I'd have to think about it.
It wouldn't be Everybody Walk the Dinosaur?
No,
Is that what
absolutely
it is?
not.
Walk your dinosaur?
Yeah, I
Walk
think
the
it's,
dinosaur?
yeah.
I think it's the.
It also would
Where's
not
Joey?
be I Am a Paleontologist. I do love the song by They Might Be Giants, but
There's a song called I'm a
it
Paleontologist?
is. There is. It's pretty good. It's worth a listen. It's definitely geared for kids, but
Did you know They Might Be Giants do the hot dog song on
Yeah.
Mickey Mouse Clubhouse?
oh yes,
I
yeah.
had no idea. Do you know what the hot dog
I don't know that
song
song.
is? It's at the end of every Mickey Mouse Clubhouse, they do the hot dog dance. But
Yeah.
it's They Might Be Giants, which is...
That was my first concert. Was They Might Be Giants.
Really?
I love They Might Be
Oh
Giants.
my gosh.
Yeah. Yes.
You're both too young for this, but do either of you remember Tiny Toons, or do you know what Tiny Toons?
Yes.
I remember Tiny
Yeah.
Toons.
So there was a Might Be Giants song in a Tiny Toons episode, also Istanbul or Constantinople.
Oh yeah.
That
yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
That was my introduction to They Might Be Giants.
Of course.
So then when I found out they did the hot dog dance, that was mind blowing.
That's exciting. That's pretty cool.
And now I'm a paleontologist.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm not, but the song.
Yeah.
Um,
Anybody can be.
you have a super cool job,
Yes.
but if you could change roles with anyone in the museum for a day, who would it be?
Ooh, anybody in the museum for a day? Well, I've worn many hats in the museum industry prior to becoming a Paleo Lab manager. So I've worked in education departments. I've worked in outreach and after school time programming before. So I would need something behind the scenes. I'm not very good at social media, but I'd like to try it. I think I'd like to give a shot at being in marketing and in social media.
I think social media is just, if you have fun with it, other people have fun with it.
Yeah.
Like, I think it translates and it comes through. So if you're just, if you're super quirky and kooky and weird with it, and you're like, oh, I'm not super skilled or clever, people will still
Oh yeah.
like be there for it, because they'll be like, look at Katie living her best life.
Yeah.
You do a good job at social media, though.
It's okay. Yeah. It's okay. It's all right.
Do you want to blast out your social media handle? Do you
Oh
want to grow
yeah.
your followers?
So first off, I should definitely say that if anybody wants to see what the field season looked like for us, follow Elevation Science at Elevation Science on Instagram, and a variation of that on Facebook. And then mine is Kate Who Excavates
Which is so cool.
That's my handle. Yeah, I love it. I can't believe that was available, and I snapped that up a couple years ago, and it is so much fun to be able to share stuff around and to highlight other people that I know in paleontology on that account too.
It's getting into politics season. I think it'd be interesting to know what different politicians' like early social media handles were. Like, people always talk about their AIM names and things like that. I would like to know what different people's, like, let's air it. What's your handle, and just see.
I'd love to know.
How embarrassing
I'd
some of these are.
I'd love to know everybody's AIM username. That'd be fantastic.
And we're only a few years away from people releasing, we found this presidential candidate's AIM away messages from 2004.
That's a nightmare.
And they're like, it's some really sad and pathetic lyrics from My Chemical Romance.
Yes.
Or something. They were going through something.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah.
Well, Katie, this has been a ton of fun.
This has been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
If you all want to catch up with Katie, rewind about 2 minutes and check out her social media. But also, you can catch her in the lab here in our Museum of Natural History and Science, and it is so cool. I mean, that space is really incredible.
Really neat.
It is, like, for a kid like Mitch growing up, that has to be your dream.
I would have
right?
loved that. Yeah. I grew up in the Toledo area, so I didn't get to come to Cincinnati Museum Center as a kid, but I would have loved it.
It's awesome. It
really is.
It's a real treasure in the building. We're really grateful for the partnership with Elevation Science, which has allowed us to activate that lab a little better, which is great for us from a collections and research perspective, but also from a guest experience perspective, because they're seeing it in real time. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for spending some time with us. And thank you all for listening to Meanwhile at the Museum. Remember, if you liked what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe. But more importantly, come see for yourself. Visit cincymuseum.org to see the latest reasons to visit. If you have any questions, comments, or just want to tell us how much you love the show, send us an email at meanwhile@cincymuseum.org. Thanks for listening.